After sitting on the sidelines of NAFTA negotiations for weeks, tonight Canada is finally back in the game, but the clock is ticking down and fast. A deal has to be made by the end of this week. And as Katie Simpson explains, that's why Chrystia Freeland and her team dropped everything today and rushed to D.C.
Never before has Canada's arrival at NAFTA talks been so critical or so closely watched. This return to Washington may just be the start of the final push to get to a three-way trade deal.
This is really going to be a full steam ahead effort with a lot of groups working very intensively. This is a really big deal.
Canadian negotiators spent the day examining the preliminary agreement between the U.S. and Mexico announced hastily by Donald Trump yesterday, and they must figure out if the deal is something Canada can work with. The Foreign Affairs Minister suggested it's possible, given proposed improvements to auto sector labor standards.
Mexico was able to do something that I think must have been quite difficult for Mexico, and make those concessions does really set the stage for some productive conversations for us here this week.
But sources tell CBC News Canada is worried about a different proposed change to the dispute resolution system. The preliminary pact is expected to weaken what's known as Chapter 19, something Canada has said it will not accept. And there is another big tension point.
There's a word that Canada has trouble with. It's M-I-L-K, milk. Anything to do with milk and dairy. They're going to have to fix that.
Donald Trump's most trusted advisors are repeating his calls for Canada to kill the dairy regulation system called supply management.
We will engage in a positive and constructive way, as we always have been, and look forward to ultimately signing a deal as long as it is good for Canada and good for middle-class Canadians.
But if Canada doesn't act quickly, there are more suggestions it may get left behind.
We hope that they are resolved so that Canada can be part. If that is not the case, we would be ready to move forward. And, but that doesn't preclude, Bashi, Canada joining in future moments.
Senior Canadian officials tell me there is a reasonable chance of success. Some kind of deal can be reached by Friday. And it appears no time is being wasted, with the Canadians meeting the Mexicans tonight and the intensive talks resuming first thing tomorrow. Rosie.
Okay, Katie, so a lot of people are probably wondering, why is there a rush to try and get this done by Friday?
There are 2 points to that. The new Mexican president wants this wrapped up before he takes office on December 1st. And in order for that to happen, the U.S. Congress must complete its 90-day approval process. For the math to work out, they need this wrapped up by the end of the week.
Okay, Katie, you'll be on the story all week. Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's take a closer look now at one of the sticking points in those talks, dairy and poultry, protected in this country by something that you've heard the name already, supply management. Canada manages or controls the supply of milk, cheese, eggs, chicken and turkey, and it limits foreign imports like U.S. dairy with some pretty steep tariffs. It controls the supply of what's available, but farmers also like it because it prevents cheaper American products from flooding in and forcing Canadians out of business. But Donald Trump is no fan of Canadian tariffs, and as Jayla Bernstein tells us, dairy farmers here are nervous that their sector will be sacrificed to appease the president.
Farming is nice, it's challenging, it's hard, it's frustrating sometimes. I mean, we do many hours. Then again, I mean, we don't take that much of salary. If you're not making money anymore, I mean, we're just asking for a decent salary and having our family farms.
Quebec dairy farmers feel they've already given up enough for international trade in 2 separate major trade agreements, one with Europe and one with Pacific nations. Canada agreed to open its dairy market slightly. Some estimate the cost to farmers is as high as $160 million a year. Now they're fearful NAFTA will also be negotiated on their backs, since their way of doing business remains in the crosshairs of the American president.
You know, they have tariffs of almost 300% on some of our dairy products, so we can't have that.
Those words weighed heavily on the minds of Quebec dairy farmers at a union meeting today.
I feel like there's a big cloud on top of my head.
With the other trade deals, Ottawa offered financial assistance to farmers hurt by the concessions. But dairy farmers say with NAFTA, there's so much more at stake.
It has a huge impact on Canada if we let go to supply management.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau insisted today he'll stand behind dairy farmers this time around.
My position on defending supply management has not changed. We will defend supply management.
We try to be positive and optimistic, but we're always afraid that we're going to pay again, and hope it's not going to be the case.
Strabel hopes his sons will someday take over the family farm, but their future on this land will be decided more than 900 kilometers away in Washington this week. Jayla Bernstein, CBC News, Montreal.
It's not just farmers nervously watching what happens in D.C. this week. That's because any changes to the 24-year-old NAFTA agreement will be important to the Canadian economy. Here's what's at stake. Some $2 billion worth of goods and services cross our border daily. That's a big number. Or put another way, every minute of every day, more than $1 million of trade crosses between the U.S.-Canada border. The United States is, of course, Canada's largest trading partner. In fact, 36 states count Canada as their top customer. And just to hammer home that point again, Canada exports more goods to the state of Michigan than it does to the entire European Union. The Canadian economy is more integrated than ever with that of our southern neighbors. Millions of jobs in all three countries depend on the success of NAFTA. The government estimates 3.5 million jobs in this country are supported by trade. And one study suggests dismantling the deal would cost as many as 85,000 jobs in the first year alone. And business investment in Canada would plunge by $3 billion.